The moment Opal Nadine stepped into Sterling Motor Group, she knew she didn't belong, but not for the reasons they assumed. At 76, with a flawless bank record and a life spent molding generations, she came prepared to buy her first new car in 15 years. But polished floors and glass walls didn't shield her from the sting of old prejudice. Laughed at, dismissed, and pointed toward the second-hand lot like she was trash. They saw her age, her skin, her old car. What they didn't see was what Opal had built over decades and how far she'd go to fight back. Just before we begin, I've got a quick question. Are you someone who listens while driving? Do you like to sit and really listen? Let me know in the comments. This story's got bite, heart, and a twist you won't see coming. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss stories like this. Opal Nadine's hands gripped the steering wheel of her aging Toyota as it sputtered and coughed down Maple Avenue. The check engine light had been on for weeks. Now strange noises rattled from under the hood. At 76, she hadn't planned on buying a new car this year, but life rarely followed plans. "Just get me home one more time, old friend," she whispered, patting the dashboard like a faithful dog. Opal had spent 43 years as an educator, 30 of those as principal at Westside Elementary. She'd shaped generations of young minds in this town. Though retired now for 6 years, she couldn't go anywhere without former students rushing to greet her. "Ms. Nadine," they'd call out, now adults with children of their own. Rain began to fall as she pulled into her driveway, the modest brick home she'd shared with her late husband James until his passing 3 years ago. The silence still felt strange sometimes. James had been her rock during the civil rights era when they'd marched together, registered voters, and eventually settled here to make change from within the system. Inside, Opal settled at her kitchen table with her reading glasses and laptop. If she needed a new car, she would do proper research. That was the principal's principle: be prepared. Her savings account was healthy. James had insisted they live below their means and invest wisely. They never flashed their wealth, preferring instead to fund scholarships and community programs quietly. After 2 hours of research, Opal had made her decision. The new Lexus ES Hybrid. Safe, reliable, good gas mileage, and yes, a touch of luxury she'd earned after decades of service. The Sterling Motor Group dealership on the wealthy side of town was the only authorized dealer within 50 miles. "Why not?" she said to the empty kitchen. "I've spent my life helping others. I can treat myself just this once." The next morning, Opal dressed carefully. Nothing flashy, a simple blouse, comfortable slacks, sensible shoes. Her silver hair was pulled back in its usual neat bun. She wore only her wedding ring and small pearl earrings James had given her on their 40th anniversary. Her handbag, though well-made, was showing its age. Just like her, she thought with a smile. As she drove across town, the divide became clear. Potholes disappeared, lawns grew larger, and homes more impressive. The Sterling Motor Group dealership appeared like a glass palace, sunlight gleaming off rows of shiny vehicles that cost more than most homes in her neighborhood. Opal parked her Toyota with its fading paint and walked toward the entrance, printout of the Lexus ES specs in hand. She had an appointment, had spoken to someone named Brad on the phone. She felt a flutter of excitement, her first new car in 15 years. Inside, cool air and the scent of leather greeted her. The showroom gleamed with vehicles displayed like jewelry. A group of salesmen in crisp suits stood chatting near the reception desk. They glanced her way, then returned to their conversation. Opal approached the front desk where a young woman barely looked up from her computer. "Good morning. I have an appointment with Brad about the Lexus ES Hybrid." The receptionist glanced at her screen. "Brad's with a client right now. You can wait over there." She pointed to a seating area without making eye contact. Opal nodded and sat down. 20 minutes passed. She watched as 2 white couples entered and were immediately greeted with smiles, handshakes, and offers of coffee. 30 minutes. Brad emerged, walked past her without a glance, and greeted another couple who had just walked in. 45 minutes now. Opal approached the desk again. "Excuse me, I've been waiting for quite some time for my appointment with Brad." This time, a woman in a navy blazer approached. Her name tag read, Tracy Harmon, sales manager. She looked Opal up and down, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Brad's very busy today, with serious buyers. Is there something I can help you with?" Opal stood straighter, dignity wrapped around her like armor. I have an appointment to test drive the Lexus ES Hybrid. I've done my research and I prepare to make a purchase today if the vehicle meets my needs. Tracy's eyebrows rose slightly. She glanced back at the group of salesmen who were watching the exchange. One of them snickered. What Tracy said next would change everything. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Tracy's voice carried across the showroom floor. The second-hand dealer is over on Commerce Street. They might have something more suitable for your budget. The words hung in the air like poison. Opal felt her heart thump against her ribs as heat rose to her face. Nearby customers glanced over, then quickly looked away. There's no misunderstanding, Opal replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I called yesterday about the Lexus ES. I spoke with Brad and made an appointment for 10:30 this morning. Tracy's smile tightened. Brad's schedule is full with qualified buyers. Perhaps you'd like to fill out a credit application first. We need to insure. I won't need financing, Opal interrupted. I'm prepared to pay in full today. A muffled laugh came from the group of salesmen. Brad, tall, blonde, with a too-white smile, stepped forward. Look, ma'am, the ES starts at $60,000. Maybe we could show you something more basic? A used Corolla, perhaps? Opal had faced discrimination before. In the 1960s, when she and James were newlyweds looking for their first apartment. In the 1970s, when she applied to be principal, and the board questioned if she could handle the responsibility. But she thought, hope things had changed more than this. She opened her purse and retrieved her driver's license and bank statement she'd brought for the purchase. I assure you, I can afford the vehicle. Tracy barely glanced at the documents. We're very busy today. Why don't you come back another time? Maybe call ahead for an appointment. I have an appointment, Opal repeated, her teacher's voice emerging, the tone that had quieted rowdy classrooms for decades. The showroom had gone uncomfortably quiet. Other customers pretended to be absorbed in car brochures. One young black salesman at the back looked distinctly uncomfortable, his eyes on his shoes. Tracy's demeanor shifted from condescending to impatient. She took a step closer to Opal, lowering her voice. Look, these vehicles require a certain lifestyle to maintain. Our clients have certain expectations about their shopping experience. The second-hand dealer is just 5 minutes away. The implication was clear. You don't belong here. You can't afford this. We don't serve people like you. Opal felt something heavy settle in her chest, a familiar weight of injustice she'd carried too many times before. But beneath it, a spark ignited. The same spark that had led her to march in Selma. The same fire that had driven her to become the first black principal in the district. I'd like to speak to the owner, Opal said. Tracy's laugh was sharp. Mr. Kensington doesn't handle day-to-day customer issues. Now, I need to ask you to leave. We have serious clients waiting. She gestured toward the door, where 2 security guards had mysteriously appeared. The humiliation burned, public and deliberate. 60 years of fighting for respect, of earning her place, of breaking barriers. And here she stood, being shown the door of a car dealership like an unwanted intruder. Opal drew herself up to her full height. Her voice didn't rise, but every word carried across the silent showroom. My name is Opal, Nadine. Remember it. She turned and walked toward the exit, her back straight, her head high. Behind her, she heard Brad's voice. Some people just don't know their place. As she reached her old Toyota, tears threatened. Not here, she thought. Not where they can see. The young black salesman had followed her outside, keeping a professional distance. Ma'am, he called softly. I'm Marcus. I'm sorry about what happened. It's not right. Opal looked at him, barely older than the students she used to teach. No, it's not right. But it's not over either. Marcus glanced nervously back at the dealership. They do this all the time. Tracy told us to pre-qualify by sight. It's wrong, but I need this job. Opal nodded, understanding the impossible position he was in. What's the owner's full name? Mr. Kensington. Richard Kensington. He's rarely here. The regional manager visits sometimes. David Porter. Opal memorized the names. Thank you, Marcus. As she drove away, her hands were steady on the wheel. The humiliation was transforming into something else. Something powerful. Something that had fueled every meaningful change in her long life. Her car might be failing, but Opal Nadine was just getting started. Opal's house felt different when she returned, smaller somehow, as if the walls had contracted with her dignity. She placed her handbag on the kitchen counter and stood silently, breathing through the anger still burning in her chest. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet, was a faded photo of her and James from 1968, standing proud at a voter registration drive. His favorite saying echoed in her mind, "Don't get mad, get organized." Opal moved to her small home office and pulled out an old leather address book. Some called her old-fashioned for keeping paper records, but today she was grateful for it. She picked up the phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in months. "Julian, it's Grandma. I need your help." Her grandson Julian had followed a path that made her proud. After Howard University and Harvard Law, he'd returned home to start a practice focusing on civil rights and discrimination cases. He was at her house within the hour. They did what? Julian's voice rose as Opal recounted the morning's events. His handsome face, so like his grandfather's, tightened with anger. "That's textbook discrimination, Grandma. We can file a suit by tomorrow." Opal raised her hand, the same gesture she'd used to quiet eager students. "I don't want just a lawsuit, Julian. I want change." She told him about Marcus, about Tracy's policy of pre-qualifying by sight, about the laughing salesman. "This isn't just about me being humiliated. It's about a system that keeps working the same way decade after decade." Julian nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'd grown up listening to her stories about fighting for integrated schools, about standing firm when others wanted her to step aside. "What do you want to do, Grandma?" Opal smiled, a plan already forming. "First, I need to make some calls." Over the next 3 hours, Opal's quiet house became command central. Julian worked on his laptop while Opal reached out to her network, a lifetime of connections built through education, church, and community organizing. She called Martha Jenkins, once a shy fourth grader, now the assistant director at the Chamber of Commerce. "Ms. Nadine, that's terrible. Actually, Sterling Motor Group just applied for permits to expand their showroom. They need approval from several boards." Next was Robert Hill, whose troubled son she'd mentored through high school. Robert now headed the local bank's commercial lending division. "Sterling Motor Group. They're hoping to refinance their inventory loan with us next month. I'd be very interested to hear about their business practices." Call after call revealed a web of connections she'd never fully appreciated. Former students in real estate, banking, media, and government. Each conversation added another piece to the puzzle of Sterling Motor Group, and more importantly, to her response. Around 4 p.m., her doorbell rang. It was Marcus, the young salesman, looking nervous on her porch. "I looked up your address," he admitted. "I hope that's okay. I couldn't stop thinking about what happened." Opal invited him in. In her kitchen, Marcus revealed more about Sterling's practices. They have a code system. When certain customers enter, especially older black folks or people who look working class, Tracy tells us to focus on priority customers. It means ignore them until they leave. Julian took detailed notes while Marcus spoke. "Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement?" he asked. Marcus hesitated, fear flashing across his face. "I need this job. My mom's medical bills." Opal reached across the table and patted his hand. "Sometimes standing up is costly. We understand if you can't." The young man straightened his shoulders. "No, Ms. Nadine. I'll do it. My mama would be ashamed if I didn't." After Marcus left, Julian looked at his grandmother with new appreciation. "You've built quite a network without even realizing it, Grandma." Opal smiled. "When you spend your life planting seeds, you sometimes forget how many have grown into trees." Her phone rang again, her friend Josephine from church. "Opal, you won't believe this. My son Thomas works for the property management company that handles Sterling's lease. He says Richard Kensington is actually coming to town tomorrow for their quarterly meeting." After the call, Opal sat quietly, considering this information. Then she opened a drawer and pulled out a bank statement Julian had never seen before. Your grandfather and I lived simply, but we invested wisely, she explained. I was going to use some of this for a new car, but perhaps there's a better use for it right now. Julian's eyes widened as he saw the figure. Grandma, that's substantial. Your grandfather called it our justice fund, for emergencies when money could make a difference. Her eyes twinkled with a spark Julian hadn't seen since his grandfather passed. I think this qualifies. She picked up her phone one last time. Hello, this is Opal, Nadine. I need to speak with Mr. Harrison about arranging transportation for tomorrow morning. Yes, I'll need several vehicles. Black SUVs if possible. Yes, that's right. 7 of them. Julian's eyebrows shot up as his grandmother detailed her requirements. What exactly are you planning, Grandma? Opal's smile contained decades of wisdom and just a touch of righteous mischief. Tomorrow, we're going car shopping. And I think it's time Richard Kensington learn exactly who Opal Nadine is. Dawn broke cool and clear, sunlight streaming through Opal's kitchen window as she sipped her morning tea. She'd slept surprisingly well, better than she had in months. There was something energizing about standing up instead of standing aside. Julian arrived at 8:30, dressed in his sharpest suit, carrying a leather briefcase filled with documents they prepared the night before. The first call just came in, he said, checking his phone. Channel 7 got an anonymous tip about a major discrimination incident at Sterling Motor Group. They're sending a reporter to the dealership around noon. Opal nodded, satisfaction warming her more than the tea. Martha called earlier. The Chamber of Commerce has put Sterling's expansion request on administrative hold, pending review. Her landline rang, one of her former teachers, now a city councilwoman. Opal, I've been making calls all morning. 4 other people have come forward with similar experiences at Sterling. One couple was told they wouldn't be comfortable with the high-end models. By 9:45, Opal was dressed in a deep purple suit she'd worn to church on special occasions. Around her neck hung a silver pendant James had given her on their 25th anniversary. Her makeup was subtle but perfect. Today was not a day for invisibility. You look magnificent, Grandma, Julian said, offering his arm as they walked to the door. Outside, the first black SUV was already waiting, driver standing at attention beside the passenger door. He nodded respectfully. Ms. Nadine. As they drove across town, Opal's phone buzzed constantly, updates from her network. More stories of discrimination at Sterling were emerging. Martha had discovered complaints buried in chamber records. Robert from the bank had accidentally scheduled Sterling's loan review for that afternoon. Like turning over a rock, Julian murmured, reading the messages. All kinds of things crawling out. The SUV turned onto Prosperity Drive, where Sterling Motor Group stood gleaming in the morning sun. As they approached, Opal saw 6 more identical black SUVs converging from different directions, right on schedule. Inside the dealership, Tracy Harmon was having a stressful morning. First, the unexpected news that owner Richard Kensington would be visiting. Then Marcus calling in sick. Now these mysterious black vehicles circling like sharks. The first SUV stopped directly in front of the entrance. The driver opened the rear door with ceremonial precision. Julian emerged first, then turned to offer his hand to Opal. She stepped out, resplendent in purple, standing tall despite her 76 years. One by one, the other SUVs parked in perfect alignment. From each emerged people Opal had called the night before. Community leaders, former students in positions of influence, civil rights veterans who'd march alongside her decades ago. Through the glass walls, Opal could see Tracy's face, confusion giving way to recognition, then alarm. Brad and the other salesmen had stopped their morning meeting to stare at the procession forming outside. The last SUV delivered Robert Hill from the bank and Martha Jenkins from the Chamber of Commerce. The group, 15 strong, gathered around Opal like a protective detail. "Ready, Grandma?" Julian asked. Opal took a deep breath and nodded. "As I'll ever be." They moved as one unit toward the entrance, a silent, dignified phalanx. No shouting, no signs, no protest chants, just the undeniable power of community solidarity. The automatic doors slid open. The showroom fell completely silent. Tracy stood frozen by the reception desk, mouth slightly open. Opal stopped in the center of the showroom, her voice clear and strong. "Good morning. I believe I was here yesterday to purchase a Lexus ES Hybrid. I was told to go elsewhere. Today, I brought a few friends with me. We're all interested in your inventory." The calculated politeness was more devastating than anger could ever be. Tracy's face flushed red as she recognized some of Opal's companions, the president of the Urban League, 2 city council members, the editor of the local newspaper, the pastor of the largest church in town. "Ms. Nadine," Tracy stammered, "there seems to have been a misunderstanding yesterday." "No misunderstanding," Opal interrupted calmly. "You told me in front of witnesses that I should go to a second-hand dealer because your vehicles required a certain lifestyle to maintain. Your salesman laughed at me. You questioned whether I belonged here. The accusation hung in the air, impossible to deny." Through the glass walls, Opal could see more vehicles arriving, a local TV news van, more community members who'd heard through the grapevine. Julian stepped forward, opening his briefcase. "I'm Julian Nadine, attorney at law. We have documented evidence of a pattern of discriminatory practices at this dealership." He placed a folder on the counter. "Inside, you'll find sworn statements from customers who were treated differently based on race, financial affidavits proving they were qualified buyers, and testimony from a current employee about coded language used by management to encourage discrimination." Brad hissed to Tracy, "Who the hell is this old lady?" Robert from the bank stepped forward. "This old lady is Opal Nadine, who with her late husband James founded the Community Trust Investment Fund that financed half the black-owned businesses in the city. The fund that, ironically, provided capital to Mr. Kensington when he opened his first dealership 30 years ago." A new voice cut through the tension. "What exactly is happening in my showroom?" Richard Kensington, tall, white-haired, expensively dressed, had emerged from the back office. He surveyed the scene with obvious confusion. Opal turned to face him, a lifetime of dignity in her posture. "Mr. Kensington, we need to talk about how your business treats potential customers who look like me." The showroom held its breath, waiting for his response. Richard Kensington's eyes narrowed as he scanned the group standing before him. His gaze settled on Opal, recognition flickering across his face. "Nadine," he said slowly. "Any relation to James Nadine?" Opal stood perfectly still. "My late husband." Something shifted in Kensington's expression, not quite softening, but a recalculation. He nodded toward his office. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." "No," Opal replied firmly. "What happened yesterday wasn't private. Your staff didn't humiliate me behind closed doors. Whatever needs to be said can be said right here." The tension in the showroom thickened. Customers who had been looking at cars now openly watched the confrontation. Outside, more people gathered, word spreading through text messages and phone calls. Kensington glanced at the growing crowd, then at the TV news van pulling up. His jaw tightened. "Tracy, what is she talking about? What happened yesterday?" Tracy stepped forward, her navy blazer suddenly seeming too tight across her shoulders. "Mr. Kensington, this woman came in without an appointment, looking to waste our time. I simply directed her to a more appropriate dealership for her budget." Julian pulled out his phone. "Actually, we have the recorded call confirming her appointment with Brad Sanders. Made at 2:15 p.m. the day before." Brad's face paled. Tracy shot him a venomous look. "And as for her budget," Julian continued, "my grandmother was prepared to pay cash for a new Lexus ES. Here's the bank verification she brought with her." He held up the document. Kensington took it, frowning as he read the balance. "Ms. Harmon also told her that your vehicles require a certain lifestyle to maintain," Martha added, stepping forward. "The chamber has received 7 similar complaints in the past year, all from people of color." Kensington's face darkened. He turned to Tracy. "Is this true?" Before she could answer, the doors opened again. Marcus walked in, still in his Sterling Motor Group uniform, despite having called in sick. He looked terrified but determined. "It's all true, Mr. Kensington," he said, voice shaking slightly. "Ms. Harmon tells us to use code phrases when certain customers come in. Focus on priority customers means ignore the black ones until they leave. Tracy's face contorted. He's lying. This is absurd. I have the text messages you sent to the sales team, Marcus countered, pulling out his phone. Screenshots of our group chat where you specifically mentioned profiling customers by appearance. Kensington's professional demeanor cracked slightly. He turned to Opal. Mrs. Nadine, I had no knowledge of these practices. This is not how I run my business. Ignorance is no excuse when you're the owner, Opal replied evenly. The fish rots from the head. If this is happening in your showroom, you've created a culture that allows it. Outside, the crowd had grown larger. The news crew was setting up cameras, pointing them through the glass walls. Kensington ran a hand through his silver hair, visibly calculating his options. He lowered his voice, though everyone could still hear him. What exactly do you want, Mrs. Nadine? Money? An apology? Robert from the bank cleared his throat. Actually, Mr. Kensington, I believe that's the wrong question. As the officer reviewing your upcoming inventory loan renewal, I'm more interested in what you plan to do about these discriminatory practices. Martha nodded in agreement. And as the person processing your expansion permit request, I'm concerned about approving additional business for an establishment with these issues. The color drained from Kensington's face as he realized the full scope of the situation. This wasn't just about one wrong customer. His entire business operation was suddenly at risk. This is blackmail, Tracy hissed. No, Julian corrected calmly. This is accountability. Kensington looked from the growing crowd outside to the grim faces surrounding Opal. His business instincts finally kicked in. Tracy, Brad, my office. Now, he snapped. Mrs. Nadine, would you and your grandson join us as well? I want to understand exactly what happened. Opal nodded. As they walked toward the office, she spotted a familiar face in the crowd outside. The TV reporter was Jasmine Williams, who had been in her very first class as a principal. Inside Kensington's office, the confrontation continued. Brad blamed Tracy. Tracy insisted she was just maintaining standards. Kensington listened with growing disgust. Enough, he finally said. I don't care who started it. This stops now. He turned to Opal. Mrs. Nadine, I remember your husband well. James helped finance my first dealership when every bank in town turned me down. He said he believed in judging people by their character and their plans, not their past or appearance. Opal's eyes widened slightly. James had never mentioned Kensington. He was a good man, Kensington continued, and I failed to honor his example. I apologize for how you were treated in my business. Tracy began to protest, but Kensington silenced her with a look. Tracy, you're suspended without pay, effective immediately. Brad, the same. I'll review all customer complaints and decide your fate next week. He turned back to Opal and Julian. But I know this isn't just about punishing bad actors. What would make this right? Julian opened his briefcase again and pulled out a document. We've prepared some suggestions. A comprehensive anti-discrimination policy, mandatory training, community outreach, transparent reporting of sales demographics. As Kensington reviewed the document, his phone buzzed repeatedly, messages about the crowd, the news crew, the social media storm brewing. This isn't going away with an apology and a promise, Julian said quietly. This is a moment that requires real change. Kensington looked up at Opal, something like respect in his eyes. You certainly came prepared, Mrs. Nadine. Opal smiled slightly. I was a principal for 30 years, Mr. Kensington. Preparation is what I do. Outside the office, the situation was evolving in unexpected ways. And what happened next would surprise everyone, including Opal. While Opal, Julian, and Kensington were closeted in the office, the showroom had transformed. News cameras captured the growing crowd outside. Salespeople stood awkwardly by their desks, unsure what to do without Tracy's direction. Marcus was giving a quiet interview to a reporter. Inside the office, Kensington read through Julian's proposal, occasionally asking questions or making notes. His face revealed little, years of business negotiations having taught him to mask his reactions. These are substantial changes, he finally said, setting down the document. Discrimination is a substantial problem, Opal replied. Kensington nodded slowly. I built this company from nothing. Started selling used cars from a dirt lot on the east side. Never thought I'd have 5 dealerships across the state. My husband believed in you, Opal said. He saw potential where others didn't. Isn't that the opportunity you denied me yesterday? The question hung in the air between them. Before Kensington could answer, commotion erupted in the showroom. Raised voices, the slam of a door. Kensington rose and opened his office door. A man in an expensive suit stood in the center of the showroom, face flushed with anger. What the hell is going on, Richard? I'm getting calls from headquarters about protests and discrimination claims. David Porter, Kensington said quietly to Opal. Regional manager for the manufacturer. Porter spotted Kensington and stormed over. The CEO is blowing up my phone. There's a hashtag trending about this dealership refusing to sell to black customers. Do you have any idea what this could do to the brand? Kensington remained calm. I'm handling it, David. Handling it? There are news vans outside. Porter noticed Opal and Julian for the first time. His eyes narrowed. Are these the complainants? How much do they want? I'll cut a check right now if they sign an NDA. Julian stood. We're not interested in hush money. Everyone has a price, Porter snapped. Opal rose from her chair, drawing herself up to her full height. Young man, I marched with Dr. King. I've been arrested fighting for the right to be treated with dignity. I've spent my life helping children believe in justice. There is no amount of money that would make me betray those principles. Porter blinked, taken aback by her quiet authority. David, Kensington said, meet Opal Nadine. Her husband helped finance my first dealership. She came here yesterday to buy a car and was treated shamefully by our staff. That's unfortunate, Porter said dismissively, but we can't let one incident. It's not one incident, Kensington interrupted, surprising everyone. I've just reviewed complaint records going back 18 months. There's a pattern here that I should have seen sooner. He picked up Julian's proposal. Mrs. Nadine and her grandson have presented a thoughtful plan for addressing these issues. I intend to implement it. Porter's face reddened. You can't make unilateral decisions like that. Corporate has protocols for. I don't need corporate permission to run my business ethically. Kensington cut in a new edge to his voice. I own this dealership. The franchise agreement gives me autonomy over staffing and sales policies. Within guidelines. Porter spluttered. Show me where the guidelines say we should discriminate against qualified buyers, Kensington challenged. Porter lowered his voice to a harsh whisper. Nobody's saying that. But these changes will cost money, affect our sales metrics, invite scrutiny of other dealerships. Perhaps other dealerships should be scrutinized, Opal suggested mildly. Porter glared at her, then turned back to Kensington. Think about what you're doing, Richard. 20 years we've worked together. Don't throw that away over some misunderstanding. The hesitation before misunderstanding spoke volumes. Kensington stared at Porter for a long moment, then made his decision. David, I think you should leave. Porter's mouth fell open. Excuse me? You heard me. I'll call corporate myself and explain my position. Kensington's voice was steady, his resolve apparent. Mrs. Nadine has reminded me of something important today. Why I got into this business in the first place. It wasn't to exclude people. It was to help them find the right vehicle for their needs, regardless of who they are. Porter stood speechless, then grabbed his briefcase. You'll regret this, he said before stalking out. Kensington turned to Opal and Julian. Well, I might have just endangered my franchise agreement, but it felt right. For the first time that day, Opal smiled fully. Doing the right thing often comes with a cost, Mr. Kensington. The question is whether it's worth paying. Kensington returned her smile. James said something similar to me once. He picked up Julian's proposal. Let's make this official. They moved back into the showroom, where the staff watched with anxious expressions. Outside, the crowd had grown, with community members holding hastily made signs. Indiscrimination at Sterling and by where you're respected. Kensington called for attention. The showroom quieted. Even the crowd outside seemed to still. Today has been educational, he began. It's come to my attention that Sterling Motor Group has fallen short of the standards I expect, the standards our community deserves. He looked at Opal. Yesterday, a respected member of our community came here to purchase a vehicle and was treated disrespectfully. That was wrong. But I've learned it wasn't an isolated incident. The salespeople shifted uncomfortably. Marcus stood straighter, chin raised. Effective immediately, I'm implementing comprehensive changes to ensure this never happens again. Kensington outlined the key points from Julian's proposal: anti-discrimination training, new hiring practices, community outreach, transparent reporting. Additionally, he continued, I'm promoting Marcus Wilson to Customer Experience Manager, with authority to oversee implementation of these new policies. Marcus's eyes widened in shock. Several salespeople looked stunned. And finally, Kensington said, turning to Opal, I would like to personally apologize to Mrs. Opal Nadine. Not only will we sell you the Lexus ES you came for at invoice price, but I would be honored if you would consider joining our community advisory board to help us rebuild trust. The offer caught Opal by surprise. She hadn't expected this level of commitment or to be drawn into ongoing involvement with the dealership. I'll consider it, she said carefully. Kensington nodded, then addressed the crowd outside through the glass doors. To everyone who came to support Mrs. Nadine today, thank you for holding us accountable. Our doors are open. Please come in. Ask questions. See for yourselves that we are committed to change. As if on cue, the automatic doors slid open. Community members flowed in, including Jasmine Williams and her news crew. Mr. Kensington, can you comment on the allegations of discriminatory practices at your dealership? Kensington didn't hesitate. They're true. We failed our community, and we're taking concrete steps to make it right. The unexpected candor momentarily silenced the reporter. Opal watched it all unfold with mixed emotions. The day had gone better than she hoped, but experience had taught her that promises needed reinforcement to become reality. Julian leaned close. Grandma, is this enough? Opal considered the question carefully. It's a good start, she finally said. But the real test comes tomorrow and the day after that. As the crowd mingled with showroom staff, asking questions and sharing experiences, Opal noticed Tracy watching from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before Tracy looked away. The battle might be won, but the war against discrimination never truly ended. Opal knew this better than most. However, for the first time in years, she felt the same rush of purposeful energy that had driven her as a young activist. Some fights were worth having, no matter how many times you had to have them. The next morning, Opal sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea and reviewing the newspaper. The Sterling Motor Group story dominated the front page. Local dealership confronts discrimination after community protest. Jasmine had done a thorough job covering the events, including quotes from Kensington acknowledging the problems and committing to change. Her phone had been ringing since dawn. Former students, church members, even a national civil rights organization interested in using Sterling as a case study for corporate accountability. Julian arrived with pastries and a thick folder. Morning, Grandma. How are you feeling about yesterday? Cautiously optimistic, Opal replied. One day of promises doesn't erase a pattern of behavior. Julian nodded, spreading papers across the table. I've drafted the formal agreement for Sterling to sign. Legal commitments, timelines for implementation, penalties for noncompliance. Opal studied her grandson with pride. In his determined expression, she saw echoes of James, the same belief that systems could be reformed through persistent pressure and clear demands. There's something else, Julian added, pulling out his phone. Social media is exploding with similar stories about other dealerships. People saying they had the same experience at luxury car dealers across the state. This didn't surprise Opal. One voice encourages others to speak. The doorbell rang. Julian answered it, returning with a puzzled expression. Grandma, Tracy Harmon is here. She wants to talk to you. Opal's eyebrows rose. Send her in. Tracy looked different from yesterday. No power blazer, no perfect makeup. Just jeans, a simple blouse, and evident discomfort. Mrs. Nadine, she began awkwardly. I don't expect you to forgive me. What I did was wrong. But I wanted you to hear something directly from me. Opal gestured to a chair. Tracy sat, hands clasped tightly in her lap. I've been in the auto industry for 15 years, she continued. It's not easy for women. I started as a receptionist, worked up to sales, then management. Every step, I had to be tougher, more ruthless than the men around me. That's no excuse for discrimination, Julian said coldly. No, it's not, Tracy agreed, surprising them. But it's context for how I became someone I don't recognize anymore. She looked directly at Opal. Yesterday forced me to see what I've become, someone who judges people the same way I've been judged my entire career. Opal studied the woman carefully. Why are you telling me this? Tracy took a deep breath. Because I want to make it right. Not just apologize, but actually help fix the problem. She pulled out a flash drive. This contains internal emails, sales records, and training materials from Sterling and 2 other dealerships where I've worked. There's a pattern of steering minority customers toward less expensive vehicles or higher interest rates. The evidence is all there. Julian reached for the drive, professional interest peaked. Why would you give us this? Because yesterday Mr. Kensington asked me if I believed our practices were wrong, and for the first time in years, I answered honestly instead of saying what would advance my career. Tracy's voice cracked. It was like waking up from a long sleep. Opal had seen this phenomenon before. People who participated in unjust systems until something forced them to confront their own complicity. Some doubled down on denial. Others, like Tracy appeared to be doing, chose the harder path of atonement. What are you hoping to achieve with this? Opal asked. I don't expect to keep my job at Sterling, Tracy replied. But I know the industry inside out. I know how discrimination works, the code words, the training methods, the ways executives hide these practices. I can help identify and change them. Julian looked skeptical. You're asking to join our side? After what you did? Tracy shook her head. I'm not asking for anything. I'm offering information that might help ensure the changes at Sterling are meaningful and lasting. What you do with it is up to you. Opal had spent decades evaluating people's sincerity, troubled students, defensive parents, reluctant colleagues. She sensed genuine remorse in Tracy, along with something else, the relief that comes with finally standing on the right side of an issue. Leave the drive, Opal decided. Julian will review it. If the information proves useful, we may contact you. Tracy nodded and stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Mrs. Nadine, for what it's worth, the Lexus ES would suit you perfectly. Good safety ratings, excellent comfort features for long drives, easy entry and exit for someone of any age. After she left, Julian examined the flash drive skeptically. Can we trust her? We don't need to trust her to verify the information, Opal pointed out. And sometimes the most effective advocates for change are those who have participated in the problem. Julian still looked doubtful, but he pocketed the drive. Mid-afternoon, another unexpected visitor arrived, Marcus Wilson, wearing a new name badge that read Customer Experience Manager. Ms. Nadine, he greeted her with a wide smile. Mr. Kensington asked me to personally invite you back to the dealership. Your Lexus has arrived from the Regional Distribution Center. Opal hadn't expected such quick action. Already? Marcus nodded. Mr. Kensington made some calls. He also wanted me to show you the changes we've already implemented. Opal glanced at Julian, who shrugged. Might as well see if they're serious. The black SUV was waiting outside again, apparently now a courtesy that Sterling would be extending to all customers. As they drove, Marcus explained the whirlwind of activity at the dealership since yesterday. Mr. Kensington called an all-staff meeting this morning. He said anyone uncomfortable with the new anti-discrimination policies should resign immediately with severance, but no recommendation. 3 people took the offer. At the dealership, the atmosphere had visibly changed. Signs in multiple languages welcomed customers. The staff was noticeably more diverse than yesterday. Kensington himself greeted them at the entrance. Mrs. Nadine, thank you for coming. I wanted you to see that we're not just making promises, we're taking action. He guided them through the showroom, pointing out new features, a customer bill of rights prominently displayed, financing information in clear language, a feedback kiosk where customers could report their experiences. We've partnered with Julian's law firm to conduct monthly reviews of our sales data, Kensington explained, looking for disparities in pricing, financing terms, or service based on demographics. In the middle of the showroom sat a pearl white Lexus ES Hybrid, detailed and ready for delivery. Your car, Mrs. Nadine, Kensington said, though I hope you'll test drive it first to ensure it meets your needs. Opal ran her hand along the sleek hood. It was beautiful, exactly what she'd researched and chosen for herself. There's one more thing, Kensington added. After you left yesterday, I made some calls to colleagues in the industry. 5 other dealership owners have expressed interest in adopting similar reforms. They've asked if you and Julian would consult on implementation. Julian looked stunned. That's unexpected. Self-interest is a powerful motivator, Kensington said pragmatically. Nobody wants to be the next viral discrimination story. But beyond that, I think many of us have lost sight of the fundamental purpose of our business, to help people find the right vehicle for their needs. Not just the right people, but all people. Opal considered the rapid developments. In a single day, her humiliating experience had catalyzed changes that might affect thousands of future customers. The work was far from done, but momentum was building in the right direction. I'll test drive the car, she decided. And Julian and I will discuss your proposal about the other dealerships. As Marcus led her toward the Lexus, Opal noticed a familiar face watching from across the showroom, a potential customer being assisted by a salesperson. The woman smiled and nodded respectfully. It was another elder from her church, someone who just days ago might have received the same treatment Opal had experienced. But perhaps not now. Perhaps not anymore. The changes at Sterling were just beginning, but Opal felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not naive optimism, but the hard-earned hope of someone who had seen progress happen slowly, fitfully, but persistently throughout her long life. Change rarely came easily. But when it did come, when people of goodwill found the courage to demand better and others found the courage to be better, it could spread faster than anyone anticipated. Opal slid into the driver's seat of her new Lexus, hands gripping the steering wheel with satisfaction. The engine purred to life at the touch of a button. Sometimes, justice arrived in unexpected vehicles. 3 weeks later, Opal drove her pearl white Lexus into the Sterling Motor Group parking lot. The dealership looked different now. New signage advertising their commitment to fair treatment for all customers hung prominently. The glass walls that had once seemed exclusionary now featured displays showcasing diverse customers with their vehicles. Inside, Marcus greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Ms. Nadine. How's the Lexus treating you?" "Like a dream," Opal replied truthfully. The car drove smoother than anything she'd ever owned, its safety features giving her confidence she hadn't felt behind the wheel in years. "Mr. Kensington is waiting in the conference room with the others," Marcus said, leading her through the showroom. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind. Julian's firm had filed a formal complaint with the state attorney general's office, using Tracy's flash drive and additional evidence they'd gathered. Rather than fight the allegations, Kensington had taken an unexpected approach, full cooperation and a commitment to industry-wide reform. Today was the first meeting of the newly formed Fair Lending and Sales Coalition, 5 dealership owners from across the state, along with representatives from civil rights organizations, consumer protection agencies, and community leaders. Kensington rose as Opal entered. "Mrs. Nadine, thank you for coming. We're just about to begin." Around the table sat an unlikely group of allies, business people who had built careers in an industry with problematic practices, now working alongside advocates who had spent years fighting those same practices. "Before we start," Kensington said, "I want to thank Mrs. Nadine for her courage in confronting the discrimination at my dealership. Without her actions, we wouldn't be here today." Opal nodded acknowledgement, thinking how strange life could be. 3 weeks ago, she'd been humiliated in this very building. Now she sat at the table as an honored advisor. The meeting focused on concrete steps, standardized pricing policies to eliminate disparities, transparent financing options, regular audits of sales data, and comprehensive training programs. 2 other dealership owners shared stories of incidents at their businesses that had gone unaddressed. The problem, one admitted, is that we created systems where discrimination was profitable. Steering certain customers toward higher interest rates or unnecessary add-ons became standard practice because it boosted our numbers. We need to realign our incentives. As the meeting progressed, Opal mostly listened. Her strength had always been education, identifying problems, bringing people together, and building consensus around solutions. These skills, honed over decades as a principal, served her well in this new role. Near the end of the meeting, Julian presented the data they compiled from Tracy's flash drive and other sources. The patterns were unmistakable. Black and Latino customers consistently paid more for the same vehicles and received higher interest rates than white customers with identical credit scores. This isn't just unfair, Julian concluded. It's illegal. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The dealership owners exchanged glances, their liability concerns evident. Opal chose this moment to speak. "Gentlemen, lady," she nodded to the one female owner. "You have a choice. You can treat these findings as a threat to be managed or an opportunity to lead. The practices outlined here exist throughout your industry. By addressing them openly and comprehensively, you can distinguish yourselves as ethical businesses worthy of consumer trust." Her words seemed to ease the tension. The conversation shifted from defensive posturing to collaborative problem-solving. By meeting's end, they had drafted a comprehensive reform plan and scheduled public announcement for the following week. As people gathered their materials to leave, Kensington approached Opal. "Mrs. Nadine, there's something else I'd like to discuss. Would you have time for lunch?" A nearby restaurant, Kensington seemed uncharacteristically nervous. After they ordered, he finally explained. "I've been thinking about James, your husband, and the opportunity he gave me. If he hadn't provided that initial financing when no one else would, I wouldn't have this business today." Opal nodded, memories of James warming her heart. He believed in giving people chances. "Yes, he did," Kensington agreed. "And I want to honor that legacy." He pulled out a folder. "I'm establishing the James Nadine Opportunity Fund with an initial investment of $1 million. The fund will provide financing and mentorship for minority entrepreneurs in the automotive industry." Opal's hand flew to her heart, genuinely surprised. "Richard, that's extraordinarily generous." "It's overdue," he replied simply. "But I'd like your input on the structure and goals of the fund. Your experience in education and community development would be invaluable." As they discussed the details, Opal felt James's presence almost tangibly. He'd always believed that economic opportunity was a crucial component of true equality. This fund would create pathways for others who might otherwise be excluded from the industry. Later that afternoon, Opal drove to the community center where Tracy Harmon had begun volunteering. After her suspension from Sterling, Tracy had approached Julian about helping with his other discrimination cases. Her insider knowledge proved valuable, and she gradually earned a measure of trust. Tracy was teaching a workshop on consumer rights when Opal arrived. About 20 people sat in folding chairs, taking notes as Tracy explained predatory lending practices and how to recognize them. "The key is to know your worth before you walk in," Tracy was saying. "Have your financing pre-approved if possible. Know the invoice price of the vehicle. Don't be afraid to walk away if something feels wrong." Opal slipped into a seat at the back, watching this transformed version of the woman who had humiliated her weeks ago. Tracy spotted her and gave a small, respectful nod before continuing. After the workshop, Tracy approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Nadine, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see your work for myself," Opal replied. "Julian speaks highly of your contributions to his cases." Tracy's eyes widened slightly at this news. "I'm trying to make amends in whatever way I can." "I can see that." Opal handed her a business card. "Richard Kensington is establishing a fund for minority entrepreneurs in the automotive industry. He needs someone who understands the business to help evaluate applications and mentor recipients. Someone who recognizes discriminatory practices when they appear." Tracy stared at the card. "You're recommending me?" "After what I did." "Because of what you're doing now," Opal corrected. "Redemption isn't about erasing past mistakes. It's about using them to create something better." As she drove home in her Lexus, Opal reflected on the extraordinary chain of events her humiliating experience had triggered. The changes at Sterling were spreading to other dealerships. The Attorney General's investigation would likely lead to industry-wide reforms. Tracy was using her insider knowledge to help consumers protect themselves. And now, the James Nadine Opportunity Fund would create new pathways for excluded entrepreneurs. James would have loved all of it. Sometimes, he used to say, the best response to disrespect is to build something they can't ignore. Opal smiled at the memory as she pulled into her driveway. Her phone chimed with a text from Julian. Breaking news. State AG announcing major investigation into auto lending discrimination tomorrow. We're cited in the press release. You did this, Grandma. No, she thought. We did this. All of us who refused to accept that this was just how things were. All of us who believed they could be better. She glanced at her Lexus, gleaming in the afternoon sun. It was just a car, metal and mechanics and technology. But it had become something more, a symbol of dignity affirmed, of wrongs addressed, of an elderly black woman who refused to be dismissed. And that, Opal knew, was worth far more than the price on the window sticker. 1 year later, Opal pulled her Lexus into the familiar parking lot of Sterling Motor Group. The dealership looked different now. Renovated showroom, expanded service center, and a new community meeting space visible through the glass walls. The sign above the entrance had been updated too, Sterling Motor Group, driving equality forward. As she stepped out of her car, Opal noticed a group of young people gathered near the entrance, participants in the automotive training program Sterling now sponsored for underserved communities. Marcus was showing them the service department, explaining diagnostic equipment with obvious enthusiasm. Inside, the atmosphere had changed completely from that day a year ago. The staff was noticeably diverse. Photos on the walls showed community events, customer appreciation days, and the ribbon cutting for the James Nadine Opportunity Fund offices. Mrs. Nadine. Richard Kensington emerged from his office, greeting her warmly. Right on time as always. Punctuality was a non-negotiable rule in my school, Opal replied with a smile. Some habits never fade. They walked together toward the new community space at the back of the dealership, a large room with comfortable seating, a small stage, and walls lined with photographs documenting the civil rights movement in their city. James appeared in several of them, standing tall among the protesters. Everything's ready, Kensington said. The press arrived early. Julian's already briefing them. Today marked the 1-year anniversary of what local media had dubbed the Sterling Transformation. What had begun as one woman's stand against discrimination had catalyzed remarkable changes across the automotive industry in their state. The Attorney General's investigation, sparked by Julian's firm and Tracy's evidence, had resulted in a consent decree requiring 17 dealerships to reform their sales and lending practices. The state legislature had passed new regulations requiring transparency in automotive financing. And the James Nadine Opportunity Fund had already provided startup capital to 15 minority entrepreneurs in the industry. As they entered the community room, applause erupted. About 50 people had gathered, journalists, community leaders, industry representatives, and many of the people who had stood with Opal that day a year ago. Julian approached with a young reporter. Grandma, this is Andre from the Tribune. He'd like a quick statement before we begin. Mrs. Nadine, the reporter began, when you walked into this dealership a year ago, did you ever imagine your experience would lead to statewide reforms in the automotive industry? Opal considered the question. Young man, I've lived long enough to see that justice rarely arrives in the ways we expect. I came here to buy a car, but when I faced discrimination, I had a choice, accept it as just how things are, or insist on better. I chose the latter, as I have many times in my life. The reporter nodded, scribbling notes. And how do you feel about the changes that have occurred since then? Cautiously optimistic, Opal replied honestly. Progress isn't a destination, it's an ongoing journey that requires vigilance. What matters most is that people who once felt powerless now know they can speak up and be heard. The formal program began shortly after. Julian presented the findings from the first year of their monitoring program. A 37% increase in successful car purchases by minority customers across participating dealerships, elimination of the financing rate gap between white and non-white customers, and improved customer satisfaction scores across all demographics. Tracy Harmon, now director of the James Nadine Opportunity Fund, introduced 3 of their grant recipients, small business owners who had received funding to open automotive service centers in underserved neighborhoods. These entrepreneurs are changing the landscape of our industry, Tracy explained. They're creating jobs, providing needed services, and serving as role models in communities where few people have historically participated in business ownership. When it was Opal's turn to speak, she walked slowly to the podium, taking the faces before her, allies and former adversaries now working together toward a common goal. A year ago, I stood just outside this building and was told I didn't belong here, she began. It wasn't the first time in my 76 years that I'd heard that message, whether spoken aloud or whispered through actions and policies. But what happened next was something special. She gestured to the room. People from all walks of life came together, not just to address one incident, but to change systems that had enabled discrimination to flourish unchallenged. Mr. Kensington made the brave choice to acknowledge wrong and commit to right. Others in the industry followed his lead. Attorneys and advocates provided expertise. Community members held everyone accountable. Opal paused, finding Marcus in the crowd, then Tracy, then Kensington. This story could have ended very differently. It could have been just another humiliation that an elderly black woman silently endured. Another indignity swept under the rug. Another reason for cynicism about whether change is possible. She smiled. Instead, it became a reminder that when we refuse to accept injustice, when we join together across differences to demand better, transformation is possible. Not perfect, not complete, but real and meaningful nonetheless. After the formal program, people mingled in small groups. Opal found herself approached by an elderly black couple she didn't recognize. Mrs. Nadine, the woman said, "We want to thank you. We bought our first new car last month, right here at Sterling. Never thought we'd be treated with such respect in a place like this." Her husband nodded. "Salesman spent 2 hours with us, never rushed us, got us a fair interest rate. Our son couldn't believe it when we told him." Opal squeezed the woman's hand. "I'm glad to hear that. That's how it should be for everyone." As the crowd thinned, Opal found herself standing alone by the wall of photographs. Her eyes lingered on one showing James at a voter registration drive in 1968. His expression was serious but hopeful, the look of someone who believed in possibilities not yet realized. He would be proud, you know. Opal turned to find Kensington beside her, also studying the photograph. "I've been thinking about him a lot this past year," Kensington continued. "When James gave me that first loan, he said something I never forgot. He said, 'The money is just the tool. What matters is what you build with it.'" Opal nodded, throat tight with emotion. "That sounds like James. I didn't fully understand what he meant until recently," Kensington admitted. "I spent decades building a successful business but never questioned the industry practices I had adopted. It took your courage to make me see what I had actually built, a system that perpetuated the very discrimination James had fought against." "And now?" Opal asked. "Now I'm trying to build something better," he replied simply. "Something worthy of his investment. Of your courage." As Opal drove home later that afternoon, she took the long way, enjoying the smooth handling of her Lexus. She passed Sterling's old competitors, now all displaying signs advertising their commitment to fair lending and transparent pricing. At a stoplight, she noticed a young black couple entering one of these dealerships, walking confidently through the front door without hesitation. They probably knew nothing of Opal Nadine or what had happened a year ago. They just expected to be treated with respect as they should. And perhaps that was the most meaningful change of all, not the policies or programs or public acknowledgments, but the simple expectation of dignity that future generations would carry with them into spaces where their elders had been humiliated. Opal smiled as the light turned green, and she accelerated smoothly forward. James had always said that progress wasn't about what change in your lifetime, but about making the next person's fight a little easier. By that measure, the past year had been meaningful indeed. In her rearview mirror, she could see the dealership growing smaller, no longer a place of humiliation, but a marker of transformation. Ahead lay home and tomorrow and all the work yet to be done. Opal Nadine drove on, dignified and determined as ever, her pearl white Lexus carrying her forward into whatever justice journey awaited next. That brings us to the end of Opal's journey for now. What its hardest isn't just the public shame she faced, but how quietly and powerfully she answered it. Opal didn't raise her voice. She raised a network. In a world that tries to silence elders, she reminded us that quiet dignity can shake buildings, shift policies, and open doors for those still unheard. Her strength didn't just buy a car, it moved an entire system. Would you have forgiven them like Opal did? Let me know what you think down in the comments. You stayed till here for a reason. This channel's different, and you know it. Hit subscribe and dive into the next powerful story.